How do you know where you are? How do you define your sense of self? Your limbs may be attached to your body, but how do you know your place in relation to everything else? What is your reality? According to V.S. Ramachandran, one of the foremost neuroscientists in the country and also the director for the Center for Brain and Cognition at UC San Diego, what you regard as you is really a transient construct created by the brain from multiple sensory sources. What this means is that your sense of self actually comes from your senses, which we know to be taste, smell, touch, sight, and sound. Then, is it possible to transport your sense of self by tricking your senses with virtual reality? To answer this question, we have to start with how humans perceive reality. Consider this the control setting, if you will, actual real life. According to cognitive scientist Donald Hoffman, our perception of reality is shaped by reproduction and survival, rather than accuracy. What we perceive is never the world directly, but rather our brain's best guess at what that world is like, a kind of internal simulation of an external reality. If this is true, then is it possible to trick your brain into thinking virtual reality is real by deceiving your senses? Current research seems to suggest that this is possible. This VR experiment put people on top of a building where they had to rescue a cat at the end. Watch what happens to their bodies when they realize that they're on top of a building. It's almost as if they thought that they were really on top of a building. Somehow, with the VR headset providing visual and auditory information, and these people walking on a plank, they reacted in the same way that they would in real life, despite the reality of their situation not matching up with the virtual reality that they saw. But why does this happen? Despite a clear lack of digital photorealism, check out that CGI, these people responded like they were in a real situation. Well, if we go back to what Donald Hoffman said, they were reacting to a threat. In this case, the threat was being on top of a building and the danger was falling off. It's the element of danger that causes our bodies to respond in a way that we would to a real threat because it's in our best interest, real or not, to always respond to a threat in a manner that will ensure our survival. Evolution shapes acceptable solutions, not optimal ones. If you see a snake, even if it isn't real, it's always better to react as if it was, because on the off chance it is poisonous, you've protected yourself by not letting it kill you and running away instead. So in virtual reality, your body responds to threats and danger in the same way as it would in real life. Kind of like this.
Oh shit! No! Oh my god! No! I'm outside the cage. No! I don't want to fight! Did you? Oh!
Okay, so evolutionarily, it makes sense to be afraid of heights or sharks or snakes. But what about people? There's no way that you would think a computer-generated person was real, right? Actually, research shows that giving a speech to a room full of virtual people elicits a similar response to giving a speech to real people. In an experiment conducted by Maria Sanchez and Mel Slater, participants had to give speeches to a virtual audience through a virtual headset. This is what the virtual audience looked like. The audience on the left was positive and on the right were negative. The positive audience was engaged and looked excited to be there. The negative audience was bored and not paying attention. To all my teachers over the years, I'm sorry if I ever looked like the ones on the right. Despite the clear lack of photorealism, participants responded almost as they would if the people were real. Those with a negative audience responded with unusually strong anxiety reactions with changes in body posture, skin color, and overall demeanor. The participants were asked for their comments afterwards, and those with the negative audience said things like this. It felt really bad, especially the man on the left who put his head in his hands. I had to ask him to sit up and listen. Or, I was upset, really thrown. I lost my train of thought. I just forgot what I was talking about. All right, Allison, so what? Public speaking is a lot of people's number one fear, so I'll only believe that virtual reality is real when I'm scared. I get it. Well, actually, maybe we can create a feeling of presence without a threat. In an experiment created by European scientists, they put participants in a VR headset that showed them a live feed from a camera that was placed behind them. They could see themselves from the back, and then they were stroked by an object as they saw themselves being stroked on the back at the same time. Visual and touch senses were both stimulated. At the end, they were displaced and asked to move back to their starting position. Oddly enough, participants stood closer to where their second self was standing from the VR standpoint rather than where they actually were, indicating that they believed the visual information they were seeing through the goggles as an accurate depiction of where they were in the room, even though that what they had seen was their own back. In another similar study, participants were moved to the left and saw instead a fake body being stroked in the same manner. The results were more or less the same, even though the body was clearly fake. However, when an object was used in place of the virtual body, the results were insignificant. Although the fake body may have been crude, it was still associated with the participant's body. On the other hand, substituting the body for an object did not create a feeling of presence. So even if things aren't photorealistic, they have to have some semblance of reality to create a sense of immersion. But what if something is photorealistic? In this video, a man explores a realistic virtual apartment in Paris. One of the first things he notes about his experience is that the hardwood floors look incredibly real, but he's standing on a carpet with his socks, so he can't feel it.
The floor in this is wood, but I'm stood in real life on a carpet, and that's really confusing my mind. Why am I feeling carpet when I'm on wood? It doesn't make any sense.
He has a case of sensory dissonance because the touch receptors on his feet are telling him that he's on carpet, but visually, he sees that he's on a hardwood floor. It seems like without a sense of imminent danger, your senses are more awake to what they're feeling, and touch or haptics become more important. Synergy between the two is imperative for immersive virtual reality, at least in this case. In conclusion, it is possible to induce a feeling of presence through virtual reality, especially if a threat is present, because you're trained to respond to your environment, your reality, to protect yourself. But even if there is no threat, your brain can still be tricked, especially if there's some sort of touch or haptics involved with the process. Photorealism, though, has little impact on perceived reality because how real something looks doesn't help you survive. You'll always respond to threats, whether they seem real or not, just because it's in your body's best interest to protect itself. It's interesting that exploring virtual reality has actually helped us to learn more about non-virtual reality. Thanks for watching, and if you have an interest in this like me, head on over to these articles for a closer look. And special thanks to all the lovely people who made this possible, from all the scientists who created the studies, to my classmates and my professor. This is the final project that I'll ever do for the University of Southern California as an undergrad, so it's mandatory for me to say fight on forever.